just one small question at the beginning. So you will be able to listen to the webinar either in English or in French. So please use the interpretation button on the lower part of your screen if you want to listen to French. Bonjour à tout le monde, bienvenue au deuxième webinaire sur le norme international d'audit. Vous savez, si vous voulez suivre les webinaires en français, vous pouvez utiliser l'interprétation qui est dans la partie inférieure de votre écran. Et donc, oui, avec ça, peut-être on va déjà commencer.
And let's start.
So, first of all, welcome everybody and thanks for joining. Let me do a very brief introduction on Sigma. So Sigma is a joint initiative.
Sigma, une initiative conjointe de l'OCDE et de l'Union européenne, principalement financée par l'Union européenne. Comme vous le savez, nous soutenons les pays candidats, les candidats potentiels à l'Union européenne et les pays voisins. Nous les aidons dans leur réforme de l'administration publique ainsi que les systèmes de gestion. Et dans le cadre de ces activités de soutien dans le domaine de l'audit interne, nous organisons différents webinaires sur les normes internationales d'audit, les Global Internal Audit Standards. Alors, il y a eu un webinaire sur les changements, mais nous allons nous concentrer à présent sur le domaine 2 des normes. Ce domaine 2 comprend des principes et des normes de déontologie et de professionnalisme. Cela décrit les exigences minimum à remplir qui peuvent guider le comportement des personnes et des fonctions qui se chargent des audits internes. Cela remplace également le code d'éthique de l'IA, qui était un élément séparé dans le cadre des pratiques professionnelles de 2017. Domaine numéro 2, les principes encouragent une culture éthique. C'est un des éléments centraux pour renforcer la confiance dans les auditeurs internes. Et donc, pour les membres pour les personnes qui font des audits internes, bien, il est important de travailler en ligne avec ces principes et ces différentes normes. Elles s'appliquent aux entités tout comme aux particuliers. Et comme je vous l'ai dit, c'est quelque chose qui doit être suivi et il y a et les exigences et les principes politiques doivent être respectés par tous les auditeurs internes. Le code de déontologie, quant à lui, entrera en vigueur en janvier 2025. Et donc, c'est le moment, le 9 janvier 2025, ce texte entrera en vigueur. Sur ce, je vais donner la parole sans plus attendre à John Chesshire. Vous le connaissez si vous l'avez vu lors du précédent webinaire. C'est John qui va présenter ce domaine. John, vous pouvez peut-être vous présenter et ensuite nous enchaînerons.
And
Thank you very
sorry,
much.
one small question. We will have some time for Q&A, for questions and answers. But of course, if you want to make a question during during John's presentation, you are also welcome to do. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pilar. And good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is well this afternoon. I'm dialing in from Yerevan today, so my time is a little bit ahead of many of yours, I think. It's a pleasure to be talking with you today. Those of you who don't know me, just a quick introduction so you know who I am. My name is John Cheshire. I'm from the UK. I have 24 and a half years internal audit, risk, governance, and broad and whistleblowing sort of experience. I've worked for a number of organisations in the UK. I've been a head of audit, I've been a chief assurance officer, head of business improvement. So I do the job that we all do. Now, I chair an audit committee. I sit on two other audit committees, including a large international charity, which I've just joined. I'm really looking forward to that. But I spend my time delivering training and external quality assessments and other internal audit services to a variety of different organisations. So I work with the Sigma project over in Georgia. I work with the OECD elsewhere. I work with NATO, UN agencies, and private sector and public sector organisations across Europe. I work regularly with about 14 institutes of internal auditors around the world. So I deliver lots of training courses and other services to them too. So I'd like to think that you're in fairly safe hands this afternoon. Someone who knows our job, knows the old standards, and like you is learning the new standards as well. Now, we will make the slides available to you again after today, so don't think that you have to sit there writing lots of things down. We will share the slides with you afterwards. And as Pilar said, I'm very happy to have questions as we talk through the session this afternoon, or if you prefer, put the question into the chat facility. As soon as I see it, I'll stop and I'll try to answer it, or we certainly have time at the end for questions and answers as well. So I do want this to be as useful as possible for you. So if there are things you want to know, I'll do my best to try to answer them today. As I said, it's our second webinar. We're diving into the detail of more of the standards now. And we're going to focus today on the second domain, ethics and professionalism. So if you're sitting comfortably, I'll make a start. Brief recap, we are familiar with the International Professional Practices Framework on the left. Went live on the 1st of January 2017. We're familiar with the different elements, I think, within it, the definition, the mission, code of ethics, as Pilar mentioned, core principles and the standards. So we have the mandatory parts. And then we have the recommended guidance, of course, the implementation guidance, the supplemental guidance. It's all changed, as Pilar said, or at least we know how it's going to change. The 2024 version was released on the 9th of January. I know many of you will be looking at it and will have been reading through it, trying to identify what's changed, what's new, what's different, what we'll have to do differently in our audit teams. And of course, the structure of the new IPPF looks a little bit different. We have 5 main domains, as we talked about last time. Purpose of internal auditing, domain 1. Ethics and professionalism, today's subject, domain 2. Governing the internal audit function, that we'll look at next time. Managing the internal audit function. And then the final domain, domain 5, performing internal audit services. If you're with us over the next few months, we'll be working through each of these domains in turn. Now, these 5 domains are going to be supported by a set of topical requirements. As we heard last time when Kathleen was talking about these, the first one of these, I hope, will be released very, very soon. And I think the intention is that this will be on cybersecurity. The expectation is that it will be released for comment, so we get the opportunity to provide feedback. And once that feedback is taken into account, and once people have decided on the final look and the final content of this, will be released. And then whenever we're doing work in the area of cybersecurity, we will have to take into account these topical requirements and ensure that we cover what is included with them. So it'll be really interesting to see what the first of these draft topical requirements on cybersecurity looks like. Fingers crossed, will be very, very soon indeed. So that's the structure. The domains are all mandatory. There is additional, excuse me, additional guidance, global guidance. I have to have a sip of water, excuse me. I haven't coughed all day, and there we go. As soon as I start talking, my throat went dry. We also have global guidance, which again will be recommended going forward. The domains are mandatory, the global guidance recommended. Okay, now you remember this slide from last time. Within the 5 domains, there are these 15 principles, and there are 52 more detailed standards. And these standards each contain requirements which we must follow as internal auditors. Those again are mandatory for us. There are conditions for implementation, things that are not mandatory, but again, sort of recommended, things that we could do as internal auditors, represent good practice. The Institute calls that part the considerations for implementation. And then the bit that I think it's really helpful for us, again, I'm going to cough, excuse me, forgive me today. Really don't know where that's come from. We have this additional bit of supporting guidance, which the Institute have called examples of evidence of conformance. That gives us indications, it gives us examples, the sorts of things that we could do to be able to demonstrate how we're following the requirements in each of these 52 standards. So it's a set of suggestions for us. You know, we might want to have a policy on this. We might want to have an annual declaration on this. It's examples of the sorts of things that we could do. We don't have to do them. There are other ways of achieving the requirements. But if we're stuck, if we're not sure where to start, then those examples are pretty useful for us. Within the Global Internal Audit Standards as a whole, there are sort of 3 other main features that I'll just briefly touch upon again. We have this idea of fundamentals that take a look at the role of audit in terms of the public interest and how internal audit as a team, as a profession, as us as individuals serve and support the public interest. It also touches upon things like what happens if we're a small internal audit team. And I know many of you will be working in quite small internal audit teams. So it talks a little bit about some of these challenges for us. There is a section at the end of the Global Internal Audit Standards about how we go about applying these in the public sector. Because the public sector is a little bit different in some respects from the private sector, a lot of similarities, a lot of aspects that are very similar indeed, but some differences too. And the Institute have acknowledged this by including sort of focus on the bits that are particularly different and what it means for the public sector at the end. And then, of course, we've got a glossary. As we said last time, it's changed a little bit from the existing glossary. There are some new definitions, there's some different words, and this time it's at the front of the Global Internal Audit Standards rather than at the back where it was last time. So do check out the glossary as well. So that's the overall structure. But as we've said, we're going to dive into the second domain in just a moment. There's a lot of words on each of these slides. As I said, part of it is so that you can refer back to these after today when we share the slides with you. I'm not going to talk through every single word on every single slide. That would be a little bit boring for everybody. but I'm going to use some of the language as a prompt to kind of highlight the bits that are most interesting, the aspects that are most different from the current situation, or anything that's kind of new and a little bit more um, um, problematic for us. So the Institute have got a statement, as you can read here. It's taken from the Global Internal Audit Standards, and it talks about how we go about conforming with the standards. Many of us know it's not always easy to fully conform or generally conform, if we want to use that term, with the standards. They set quite a high bar at the present time, quite a high challenge for us. And we might aspire to conform, but it isn't always that easy in practice. The Institute acknowledges that, and they recognise audit done in a particular way, then all of that can affect our ability to generally conform with the standards. As it says in that sort of second paragraph, in these circumstances, then we ought to put in place something different to try to achieve the standard wants from us, the intent of the standard. So the Institute recognises it isn't always as easy as they would like or as we would like to do what we're supposed to do. It might be a little bit difficult for us, particularly where resources are limited. If we can't, then we need to think a little bit about what we can do instead to try to achieve what the standard is expecting from us. As we can see, particularly in the bottom there, our ability to fully conform is likely to be affected by the size of internal audit or of the size of the organization. So if we work in a very small organization, maybe we're a team of one, maybe two auditors, and again, it makes it a little bit challenging to generally conform with everything we would like to do. Particularly, I suppose, aspects of the quality assurance and improvement program. If I'm a single auditor, who reviews my work? How we deal with that, of course. So that's what the Institute is trying to support us with in that. Okay, we've said that there are 5 domains, 15 principles. The 15 principles are on this slide. We're looking at the second domain today, ethics and professionalism, which is a sort of combination of the old code of ethics that we know and love, and one or two of the attribute standards that we'll also be familiar with around due professional care. So they've sort of combined these separate elements into this second domain, and there are 5 key principles, 5 principles involved in this domain. You'll recognize the words. It's very similar to what we have in our current code of ethics. Integrity, objectivity, competency, confidentiality, those 4 elements, with that addition of the 5th part here, the 4th principle, as you can see, exercising due professional care. That's what we're on about today. So again, I will get stuck in and we'll kind of start to get into the detail of these. Okay. We have the sort of principles at the top there. We can see that integrity, the principle is very short, it's very clear. Internal auditors demonstrate integrity in their work and behavior. We've got 3 supporting standards there. One that we began to talk a little bit about last time, and we'll talk a bit more about today, honesty and professional courage. We've got the organization's own ethical expectations, and then one around our legal and ethical conduct or behavior. There are 3 standards associated with objectivity, 2 with competence, and as you can see, 3 and 2 more for the last principle, confidentiality. So in total, we're looking at what, 11, 12, 13 standards and 5 main principles. And looking at those, there's 1 or 2 that are a little bit new or are worded a little bit differently. Honesty and professional courage being one. We can look to the 4th element there, the 4th part, 4th principle. We can see professional skepticism is there. We don't have a standard around that at the present time. And confidentiality is kind of broken out in 2 parts: how we use information, how we protect information. Jumping back to the middle, competency, it's similar to what we have in the current International Professional Practices Framework and the current International Standards and Code of Ethics. We've got a point around competency, we've got a point around CPD or CPE, continuing professional development. And then to the left, objectivity, something that we are very, very familiar with as internal auditors, how we carry out our work with an unbiased mind and open mind. We demonstrate our own objectivity. We need to do to protect or safeguard that objectivity, and how we go about communicating any challenges, any difficulties with objectivity. So I think there's a lot here that looks familiar, a lot that looks very similar to what we've grown up as auditors working towards. There are some new parts within it, within the detail of all of this. Okay, so sort of introduction to the main 2 says this. It is about replacing the former Code of Ethics, as Pilar said at the start. It's about detailing our expectations in respect of our conduct, our behaviour as professional internal auditors. This applies to us who lead internal audit functions. It applies to audit managers, senior auditors, brand new trainee internal auditors as well. It applies to in-house teams, those of us who deliver our internal audit services within an organisation. But it equally applies to those of you who might work for outside parties. Miroslav or Dragana now, you've raised your hand. Do you have a question? Okay, maybe it's just an accidental raising of the hand. If you have a question, I'm very happy to take it, or if you put it in the chat if you like. All right, I think I've, yeah, sorry, there we go. I've just worked that out, thank you. Dragana, did you want to ask a question? But your hand is up. Okay. Yelena, did you want to ask a question?
I'm going to try and give them the floor. Just on 1 minute. And now, yeah, Dragana. So I'm trying to give you the floor.
I think I'd try to do that as well. So
yeah, I'm trying to, but I don't know why. And Yelena, let me. Okay, let's do this. I don't know why.
I think it might be an accidental raising of the
Might
hand.
be, but yes, I'm trying to.
Pilar, can I help you?
Yeah, no, I've given them permission to talk.
Okay, so maybe it's accidental then.
But maybe it's just accidental, perhaps.
Yeah, can we just make sure, everyone, that if we try not to raise hands unless, there really is a question.
Yes.
Otherwise, we'll waste time because I'll keep coming.
Yes, let's do that.
Or very happy to have questions, though. So please, if there is anything, raise the hand. We'll give you the floor. And, easy questions are very much appreciated. Okay, so let's come back to this. Applies to all of us, irrespective of who we are delivering internal audit. Applies to in-house teams. It applies to the firms and the professional services companies that also deliver internal audit services. Right, here we go. Is there a question there? Is it Yagoda? Jagoda, is there a question? If you could unmute. Okay, I'm guessing it's another accident. Okay.
Yes, perhaps.
Right.
So
I'm gonna go on. Okay.
no.
So all of us, our colleagues internally within organizations, our colleagues externally, anybody who might work for themselves as an internal audit consultant, anyone, of course, as Pilar said at the beginning, who is a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors. Why have these principles and these standards in particular? Well, as we said at the very beginning, it is about trust. Okay, following, conforming, or if you prefer, complying with these principles and standards. It's all about trying to promote a sense that we can be trusted. We talk a lot about being trusted advisors or trusted professionals. Following these particular principles and standards helps create that environment of trust for us. Why? Because again, it helps create a culture, an ethical culture within our work as internal audit, within our profession and within the atmosphere in which we operate as internal auditors. People, we got something in chat. What are the components of successful fit auditing? Oh, that feels like a slightly different question to what we're looking at today, but I've audited culture and ethics several times in my internal audit career. And again, there are various ways of doing this. It might be that we have codes of conduct within our organization that could act as a criteria by which we assess against. It might be that things like employee surveys have been used. We can dive into the results and take a look at the kind of responses to those surveys, looking to see if there are any concerns that are being raised, any areas that we could zero in on in our internal audit work, whether bullying, discrimination, harassment, sense of mistrust of managers or leaders. So employee surveys can be useful. Codes of conduct can be useful. Contact with the whistleblowing or the speak out line, if we could analyze the sort of areas that the concerns are coming from, maybe that points to problems with the culture or the ethics in that part of our organization. If there hasn't been any form of employee survey, then we could perhaps create our own survey to share across sample or the whole organization, perhaps using a tool like SurveyMonkey, for example. And we could ask questions like, you feel that if you raised a concern, you would be treated fairly. We could look to see what people feel about that. Perception-based surveys. It really is a subject for another day, because we could spend a day, and I actually spend quite a lot of my time delivering training on auditing culture and ethics. But I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavour. I should say that the Global Institute of Internal Auditors, Global IA, they produced a really good sort of, I think it's supplemental guidance on auditing culture. That's available either from your local institute or from the Global Institute's website. If you are a member of BI, well worth a look at, and it's really quite well written, actually. I hope that helps a little bit. Okay, now, in terms of our own ethics and professionalism, it's all about trust. People know that we're behaving properly. If our conduct is beyond reproach, then the thinking is that they can potentially trust us a little bit more, do the job that we do properly, professionally, fairly, and with honesty. And that's what it's all about. If they trust us, it allows us to move our audit work from simply ticking boxes and sort of checklist compliance type auditing into audit work that can really add value and really deliver additional sort of insight and even foresight, like we mentioned last time. It can deliver much more impact. If people trust us, if we have their confidence, if they're open with us, if they engage with us, then we can move from ticking boxes into delivering positive impact, of course. And that's what we should all aim to do. So we're required to follow these standards of ethics and professionalism, just like we are all the other elements of the Global Internal Audit Standards. First principle is about integrity. And first part of the current code of ethics is about integrity. So in a way, integrity supports everything else that we do as internal auditors. Without integrity, we've got a real problem. Integrity isn't something that should just be for us as internal auditors. Every member of our organization should operate with integrity, in my opinion. It's a basic sort of building block for everyone and for every organization. But because of the special role that we carry out, because of our privileged activity and our access to everything, we have to potentially demonstrate even more integrity than regular members of the organization. I always think we have to be better than everybody else in everything that we do. Not because I'm competitive, but because of the job that we do and our ability to go and look at anything and to stick our noses into whatever it is we want to look at. It's a tremendous power, and it gives us a huge responsibility to do our work properly. So integrity is even more important for us, in my opinion, than for anyone else. Okay, so what is integrity? It's about behaving honestly. It's about following moral and ethical principles in our work, as we can see here in the middle. It's about demonstrating honesty, demonstrating courage, and we'll talk a bit more about courage shortly. Even when we're facing difficulty, challenges, problems, even if we think somebody is going to shout at us, even if we feel someone's going to threaten us, even if we think it could affect our future career or prospect in an organization. The Institute is very clear about it. And this is an area where perhaps they're more explicit and clearer now than they have been in the past. Okay, we have to demonstrate honesty and courage when we've got the facts and the evidence, even when it could result in difficult problems for us. And that could be personal problems. It could cause problems when we go to work with this department or this division or this manager in the future. The final sentence of that second paragraph, hugely important. Basically, it says, we are expected to tell the truth and do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable or difficult. And, we know that this can be a challenge, both outside of work and in work as well. It sounds very easy. It sounds something that occurred just like that. tell the truth, do the right thing. But when it's uncomfortable or difficult, we sometimes get a little bit nervous. We sometimes waver a little bit. We potentially, backtrack or change our approach. Or instead of saying something really needs to be fixed immediately because it's a huge risk that could ultimately destroy the organization, maybe we begin to rein back a little bit. It's a risk. It needs to be addressed. This may take a little bit of time. When we do that to try to avoid conflict, most people don't like conflict. Most people don't like difficult situations. So they try to adjust the messaging and adjust the approach to make that difficult situation a little bit easier. And sometimes they'll take the approach of watering down what they're going to say, of being too diplomatic, of fudging or underplaying the size and nature of the problem, just because we want an easy life. The standards, this principle says we can't do that. Okay. So do think a little bit after today how you're going to try to achieve this principle in practice. If you are a head of audit, if you're in a central harmonization unit, if you manage auditors, you're going to have to try to create a culture within the audit team, within the audit profession, where honesty is encouraged, where we're encouraging people to be courageous and brave. We're supporting them to act with courage and to be honest, even when they're facing difficulties. So we're going to have to try to manage our people, guide our people, and support our people to do this properly. It isn't always easy to do the right thing, but often the important things aren't easy. They're still very, very important. And integrity is about as important as it gets for us as internal auditors, in my opinion. All right. Now, the first of the standards is one that we spoke a little bit about last time. For me, it's probably one of the most interesting new parts of the Global Internal Audit Standards. We must, so it's not optional, we have to do this, okay? We must perform our work with honesty and professional courage. To say it quickly, it sounds easy. If you start thinking about it, again, it proves a little bit difficult. You can see some of the words here. We must be truthful, accurate, clear, open, respectful in all professional relationships and communications, even if we're being skeptical or we're taking a different position to the people that we're engaged with. We certainly can't make false, misleading, or deceptive statements. That I hope goes without saying. But there are some things that we sometimes be tempted to do. It says here we shouldn't conceal or omit findings or other relevant information from communications. So, we're not allowed to conceal findings. We're not allowed to say things are okay when they're not, even if it may be easier for us to do so. Similarly, I can't say things are terrible if we found some things that are okay, because that wouldn't be true or fair either. It works both ways. So we do have to disclose the full range of information and facts that we have so that the right decisions can be made. Then we get to the interesting bits. We must show or exhibit professional courage by communicating truthfully and taking appropriate action, even when we're facing difficult situations and dilemmas. Do I say this? Do I say that? Is it okay? Is it not okay? These difficult situations. And, we all face these difficult situations. sometimes I may go out shopping with my wife. We might look at clothes. I might see something I really like, and I might ask her opinion. How does this look? And if I've made it clear that I really like it, could put my wife into a difficult situation, bit of a dilemma. Could she communicate truthfully? Because she's in a difficult spot here. She knows I like it, but if it looks terrible, then may not want me to buy it. Certainly may not want to be seen with me if I'm wearing it, for argument's sake. So in that situation, she has a difficult decision to make. Does she tell the truth? It looks terrible. Put it back. What are you thinking about, John? Knowing that that can upset my feelings because I really like it. Or does she say, no, it looks good. If you want it, you should buy it. I really like it. And, that saves up a problem for the future, doesn't it? If everybody else thinks it looks stupid, like she does, but doesn't say, then I'm going to be walking around looking foolish and people will be laughing at me. It's a difficult situation. Now, of course, the situations we find ourselves in at work are often much more difficult than that. We run the risk of upsetting people. We have to tell a manager, a project manager perhaps, that his baby, his project is ugly. Nobody likes being told that their baby is ugly. So difficult conversations, difficult dilemmas, difficult situations. And sometimes we're having to give these difficult messages to very senior managers, ministers, whoever it might, mayors, whoever it might happen to be. And often they don't like bad news. We have to deal with that as professionals. Something else that we need is the support of our head of audit, the chief audit exec. Because I've seen this situation several times in my audit career too, where perhaps an auditor has done some very, very good work. They've got some really good evidence pointing to a problem in an area or a team. They presented that evidence in a report. Head of audit is reviewing that report. It says, well, we can't possibly say this. It will upset relations with this senior manager, and we really need to be on their good side because we've got the 3 other pieces of work that we want to do later in the year. We can't say that. It'll destroy the relationship. Go away, rewrite it. Not good. Okay, particularly if the auditor obviously has the evidence for their conclusions and for their findings. The alternative to that is what it says here. Chief audit exec must maintain a work environment where the team feels supported. That's a lovely phrase, where internal auditors feel supported when they're doing their job properly. That's basically what it says here. When expressing legitimate evidence-based results, whether they're good or bad. I suppose as well as saying things are bad and worrying, oh, we can't possibly say that. I have seen it the other way as well. Perhaps if we've written a report, we've said actually everything is pretty good here. Risks are being managed, the right controls are in place. We give reasonable assurance that the area should be able to achieve its objectives. I've seen heads of audit get a bit nervous. What happens if it goes wrong? We never give a green audit report. Find something. There must be something. Go away. Try a bit harder until you find something to bring it down to an amber rating, something like that. Well, again, that's not right. It's not honest. We have evidence. We have evidence. We need to support the theme that it says here when they're presenting legitimate evidence-based results. All right. Now, this standard goes on. We mentioned the considerations for implementation earlier. These are not mandatory, but they are recommended. They usually use the word should, as you can see here in that first sentence. So when it comes to honesty and professional courage, these are the considerations we need to bear in mind or consider. Internal auditors should enhance their awareness and understanding, honesty and courage. How? By undertaking ethics-related training, development, education. Okay, so we should always try to improve ourselves, but in particular, if we feel like we need to understand a little bit more about this, then perhaps ethics training, discussions, debates within the audit service, all of that be helpful. If we encounter difficult situations where we feel that our honesty or professional courage is being challenged, then we need to talk to our colleagues about this, either to our manager, to our head of audit, or the chair of the audit committee potentially. So there may be other people that we can talk to, but these feel so this also sort of filters into the CPD, CPE requirements that we have to. We know that if you are a certified internal auditor, then you have to have a couple of hours CPD a year around this. In fact, this webinar will probably give you nearly 2 hours of that for this year. So there we go, extra bonus as well. But it may be that we need to think about this going forward a little bit more, that we think a little bit more about how we deal with ethical dilemmas. We do need to create a culture or an environment where auditors can be brave and demonstrate courage within our team, and how we support our teams in these areas. So it's an interesting area and one that I think we'll all think a little bit more about as time goes on. I suppose just before we move on, have I had to be courageous as an auditor? A few times in my career, yes. I've had to stand up to very powerful managers who are sort of loud, who have a track record of talking down to people. And I've had to stand my ground and argue my points and support my team. Has it been easy? No. Is it something I would like to do more often? No, not really. Is it important that we do it? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And the standards are setting a challenge for us that's a little bit higher in this area. Okay, I'm going to move on, given time. We've got our second standard here around the organisation's ethical expectations. So we've got to understand the sort of ethical or code of conduct type expectation of the organisation. So what are the organisation's values? What does the organisation's code of conduct cover? What would the organisation think about this behaviour or that behaviour? We've got to understand that, recognize that, because that sets boundaries within which we can operate. It also sets boundaries within which senior managers, and employees should operate too. As it says here, we have to encourage and promote an appropriate ethics-based culture in the organisation through our work, through our activity, through our own conduct, and through our reviews that might look the conduct of others. If we identify behavior that is not aligned to the organization's code of conduct or ethical expectations, we must report that concern. And it may be that there's some sort of formal policies and procedures for this, some sort of broad reporting line, some sort of whistleblowing line, or of course we can quite happily report it up our management chain within the audit service. So we've got to, as I said in our last talk about this, we've got to think a little bit about what this statement means for us. And if we as internal auditors come across behavior that is not within the boundaries of our code of conduct, how are we going to escalate that and to whom? I feel there's probably some conversations within internal audit we would have and should have, and then some conversations that potentially the head of audit has to have with other people. Now, from the considerations for implementation, it says a little bit more. It says that if we find that a member of senior management has behaved in a way that is unethical or falls outside of the code of conduct in our organization, then the chief audit executive needs to report that to the board. Remember, the Institute uses the term board, but it might mean the minister, it might mean the audit committee, it may mean different things depending upon the organization and its context. But it's pretty clear we could report this violation to the board. Of course, if certain very senior people are involved, then there may be different reporting lines for this. It's pretty clear. This applies at every level, not just the employee, not just junior managers, but for senior managers too. Okay. The third and final part in the integrity section of domain 2 is this one around legal and ethical behavior. And this sort of amuses me, but it scares me a little bit too. Internal auditors must not engage in or be part of any activity that is illegal or discreditable to the organization or the profession of internal auditing, or that may harm the organization or its employees. That feels quite raw for me. The second paragraph, we must understand and abide by the laws relevant to the industry in which our organization operates. Okay, so that gives me a little bit of guidance around, aspects of law or regulation that applies to financial services, to insurance, to local or central government, etc. But, it also, these two sentences also scare me slightly. We can't do anything that is illegal. Well, anything that is illegal? That means if you get caught speeding by the police, if you potentially get a parking ticket for your car by parking illegally, then potentially you've broken this aspect of our code of ethics. Should you report it to your head of audit? Maybe. It depends what the practice is in your organization. The requirement, remember, requirements are mandatory. Internal auditors must not engage in or be party to any activity that is illegal. Scary. Okay, so something to think about. If we do identify legal or regulatory violations through our work, we must report these to individuals or entities who have the authority to take action, specified in laws, regulations, policies, and procedures. So there is an element here that may relate to internal escalation, but there's potentially an element here that that could lead to external reporting, perhaps to regulators. And again, it's quite clear here we must report such incidents to the right places that have the authority to take appropriate action. So again, the benchmark is being set quite high. The Institute has this sort of focus on the public interest role of internal audit and internal auditors. It might be that we have to go and potentially talk to regulators if we find serious wrongdoing in our organizations. Okay. We probably know that already, but it's spelled out much more clearly here now than it has been in the past. Now, I said that there were sort of examples of the sorts of things in places within these standards, and This is some sort of examples of bad conduct the Institute would frown upon. A range of different things: bullying, harassment, discrimination, lying, tricking, deceiving, false reporting, not reporting illegal activities, taking or obtaining confidential information without the right permissions. A range of examples. We should say, of course, that again, even though there's lots of words on these slides, there is even more detail within Global Internal Audit Standards. So you're still going to have to read those as well, I'm afraid, just to ensure that you're familiar with each element relating to each principle and each standard. This is still a summary, I'm afraid. Now, the objectivity bit is a little bit more straightforward for us, very similar to what we have in place at the minute. We must maintain an impartial and unbiased attitude when doing our work. This allows us to make professional judgments, do our work properly, and ultimately deliver an effective internal audit service. So no real difference to what we have at the present time. The principle says that positioning of the internal audit service is very important here too. If we have the right organizational position, the right place in the structure or the hierarchy, then that will support us and help us be objective in our work. If we don't have the right reporting lines, if we don't have the right status or position, it makes it more difficult for us to be objective, because people say, no. So we need the right position. Now, when it comes to individual objectivity, very similar to what we know already. We have to be objective when we're doing our work. We have to apply this impartial, unbiased, fresh pair of eyes, open mindset, and we must make our judgments professionally based upon balanced assessments of the circumstances. We have to be aware of the fact that we may have biases and other people may have biases too. We mentioned these briefly last time. You may remember these are examples of types of bias. So it's hard for us sometimes to review our own work critically and objectively, because we've written it, so it must be good, surely. Well, not always. And it's often good to get other people to review our work too. Whenever I had an important message to send or to share, I always ran it past one of my team. What do you think of this? Does it look about right? Familiarity bias. I know that I've slipped into this trap before myself, where we make assumptions about things based upon our previous experiences. So if I said to you, what's the next audit? You said, well, I'm off to take a look at human resources. And I said, human resources? Oh, they're terrible. Last time I looked at them, they were really rubbish. You're going to find all sorts of problems this time. They're completely unprofessional in how they do work. Well, that's demonstrating familiarity bias. It could influence the person I'm talking to. Just because I found something bad last time, it doesn't mean I'm automatically going to find something bad this time. Definitely a trap to be aware of. And then, of course, we have these either stronger prejudices or something that perhaps is less conscious, an unconscious bias, where we may have particular ingrained thoughts or attitudes to people based upon their culture, their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, or whatever else it might be. And again, that can influence how we deal with them, what we think of them, what we write about them in our reports. And again, we definitely have to manage that and be alert to those kind of risks. Final element in this part, remember I said the objectivity bit is pretty similar to what we have in our current kind of code of ethics. So there's nothing that's too scary or new here. But again, we have this important requirement to try to protect our objectivity. We have to be alert to dangers here. We have to recognize, avoid, deal with actual or potential threats. Also, perceptions of threats to our objectivity. So there might be nothing in it at all, but if people think that this could be a danger to objectivity, then I might still have to try to manage it. Now, the second sentence, second paragraph here always makes me smile. We can't accept gifts. Well, I can't really remember the last time any auditor I know of was offered a gift. Normally, it's the opposite that we're given or the opposite that we're offered. Very rarely gifts. So I guess that one might be too common for us to deal with. But conflicts of interest, actual, potential, or perceived conflicts of interest, are of course things that do worry us quite a lot, and things that we do need to take steps to try to manage. So this might be where we are auditing in an area where we have friends working, family members, where we've been maybe auditing there for a number of years and we know everybody. Well, we do need to think a little bit about how to deal with those potential threats to our objectivity and those potential challenges in terms of conflicts of interest. There are things that we can do, of course. We can sit down before every audit and think, is there any potential for a conflict of interest here? I encourage people to speak and to tell me if there is something that could be seen or thought of as a conflict of interest. I'd rather be aware of it, even if we, don't think there's a problem with it at all. I can still sort of take steps to address it or deal with it if I know about it. I'd rather people, raise concerns that I was able to say, no, that's not a problem, than rather than didn't tell me about something. Okay. So better to create an environment where we think about it, we say, oh, but I know John and he works there, and us to then deal with it quite sensibly and quite professionally without it causing any obvious problems. Final bit then, if we do find that there is a potential impairment, potential challenge to objectivity, if objectivity is actually impaired, either in reality or through appearance, then basically we need to take steps to deal with it and to report. So something comes to light that I didn't know about. If I find out about it afterwards, then I need to deal with it and maybe tell people about it. So I didn't know that John had a cousin working in the team. John audited that team, and it's only later that he mentioned that he had a cousin. He didn't mention it because he didn't think it was important. And in practice, it may not be very important. But in that situation, I should probably remind John that he needs to think about this a little bit more carefully. And I may need to talk to the manager of the area that I've audited, maybe the audit committee, and just to explain that situation to them. Most of the time, this is not going to be a big problem. Of course, if it is something more material than that, where the impairment is much more serious, then of course, much more serious responses need to happen. But things don't happen that often in my experience. All right. Third one. So we've got we're sort of 3 out of 5, but some of these are quite sort of short, quite straightforward. It's 1 or 2 of them, particularly the first one, with its honesty and courage, that are a little bit newer. This one, competency, very similar to what we have in the existing code of ethics. So we have to apply knowledge, skills, and ability to do the job and to do the job properly. How do we demonstrate competence? Well, we have to develop and then apply knowledge, skills, and abilities to deliver the job. So this is a challenge for all of us. We must all continue to develop our competency. Things change. The world changes. Technology, as we know, is changing incredibly. Processes change in our organisation, new laws, new regulations come in. So there's plenty of development of competency that we all need to do. I'm trying to learn a bit more about artificial intelligence this year. And I attended a webinar yesterday evening from the UK Institute that had a really interesting speaker talking about how they're using AI to help them describe risks properly, better, and how they're using AI to help generate some of the reporting. They're entering in bullet point findings and then using AI to turn that into better presented text, which they then review, of course, properly. Very interesting development. So we all need to keep up with developing our competency, of course, because everything changes regularly. We deliver a whole range of services, and if you think how our work covers the whole organisation, so there's all sorts of different areas of competency we need to do our job as effectively as possible. All sorts of specialisms and specialist areas to find out more about. So, see, competency and then the subsequent standards around CPD, hugely important. You know, one thing that I think is something that we can do here is do a kind of competency map or some sort of skills analysis for our audit team. If we've got 5 members of the team, we could use the IA's competency framework, do some sort of gap analysis. Where have we got the kind of right in-depth skills, a sort of green or a 10 out of 10? And where have we got gaps or 1 or 2 out of 10, or nobody with the knowledge, skills, or experience that we need? So we can use sort of tools like the IA's competency framework to help us show the priorities that we have as an audit service, developing competency. So the standard, very similar to the principle, we've got to maintain and continually develop their competencies. And you're all doing this by attending session today. I did this by reading about the new standards and thinking about it a bit before today. We've got to undertake CPD or continuing professional development. And that should include education and training. If we've got professional certifications, then of course we have to maintain the CPD hours to keep those fresh. And again, the skills analysis, skills strategy, TNA or training needs analysis, it's something that I think every audit team should have. If I was coming along to do an external assessment of you, it's one of the things that I'd expect many audit teams to have, to help show what skills, knowledge, competency, and experience they have, and what the gaps and the priorities are for improvement. Now, when it comes to the considerations for improvement around competency, now the Institute give us some examples of the sorts of areas of competency that we should have. You can read them. I'm not going to read them all out, but be knowledge and expertise in certain business functions, knowledge and expertise in common risks like fraud, be knowledge and experience and competency in our audit tools, techniques, technology, data analytics, etc. Laws, regulations, industry practices. The list is a pretty big list. We won't be short of things to potentially think about and to study here, in my opinion. The second standard in this area, and the sort of final standard in this section, is about CPD. And it sort of says, echoes what we saw with the principle. We have to develop this. Why? To improve the effectiveness and quality of internal audit services. Word effectiveness is really important as well. It is one of the themes of these new global internal audit standards. A very important theme. A good internal audit service shouldn't just comply with the standards. The Institute is very keen that the Internal Audit Service also be effective in delivering its job properly in its organisation. It would be relatively easy to conform with many of these standards, tick, 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 tick. But do we, is it harder to deliver an effective internal audit service that goes beyond just ticking off the standards? I think it is, because that's about how we work with our organisation, how we engage with managers, the work that we do, the risks that we're looking at, how we report those, uh, whether we're efficient in how we work, whether we are looking and delivering insight and foresight in our work. All of that is much harder than just pick against some of the standards. So this theme of effectiveness is something that we'll all think more about as well when it comes to our audit services. Not just are we doing it well? Are we delivering an effective service in our organizations? Okay, so competency, CPD can help us be more effective, deliver better quality audit services. So very important to put the effort and the resources into CPD and into enhancing our competency. Okay, fourth principle, due professional care. We have this in the attribute standards previously, and the words aren't particularly different, so I haven't boldened anything here, as you can see. We have to apply due professional care when we're planning our work and when we're delivering internal audits. How do we do that? By following Global Internal Audit Standards, by thinking about the work that we're doing, and by being skeptical when we're carrying out our work, particularly in terms of what we're being told, what we're looking at, what we're seeing. It means that we should plan and deliver proper internal audits with diligence, good judgment and expertise, and the skeptical mindset that we spoke about last time. And we should deliver all our work to the same sort of level that any other prudent, that means careful, professional, any prudent and competent internal auditor would expect. So if I do some work and I ask another experienced head of audit to look at it, would they draw the same sort of conclusions as me? Are my findings about right? Or have I written something and they'd say, this doesn't look good, John. I'd be saying this, or this. In which case, maybe I've not demonstrated due professional care in my work. So we're not expected to be perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, even with QA. We sometimes make mistakes. I know that I make mistakes sometimes. We're not expected to be infallible or like God, but we are expected to do our work with this level of due professional care. Now, the first bit is fairly straightforward, conforming with the Global Internal Audit Standards. Okay, fair enough. It does say that we do have to develop an internal audit methodology. Well, I would hope most of us have some sort of audit manual, some sort of set of processes and templates that we use, some sort of documentation for our team to follow, and that we train new people in this. We review it from time to time. We make sure that it's up to date and in line with good practice. Should never say the same forever. It needs to continuously improve. But our methodology must be established, documented, and maintained in line with the standards. So if you've got developments in your methodology that you haven't yet documented, that you haven't yet written up, then you need to. Things that we're doing need to be documented. And they need to be aligned to the standards. So if the standards say one thing, but our work does something else, not good. We won't be conforming with these global internal audit standards. So it's about how we bring what we do more in line with the global internal audit standards. Now, as we saw at the beginning of the session, if we're unable to conform with a particular requirement, then the head of audit, the chief audit exec, needs to document that, explain why it is, what, if anything, we're doing instead to try to deal with it, and why this situation exists. They should probably share that information with the board or the audit committee, if you like to explain. We're not conforming with this. These are the reasons why. This is what we're doing instead. There you go. You need to know. Now, what sort of situations are there when we must exercise due professional care? Well, there's plenty of situations and circumstances when we're thinking about our service and the nature and the circumstances of the service that we're providing. We need to think a little bit about whether the work that we're doing is in line with the organization's strategy and objectives. We need to think a little bit about how key stakeholders they expect from us as internal audit. We certainly need to take a look at the effectiveness of governance, risk and control. If we're not doing that, what are we doing? We need to look at costs versus benefits. We need to look at how much work is required to achieve engagement objectives. There's a whole range of things that we need to think about as we're considering due professional care. Tools, techniques, technology can help us. It's much easier to demonstrate due professional care if I've looked at everything, million transactions, using some software. It's much harder to demonstrate due professional care if I've sampled 10 transactions out of this million through manual sampling, because there's a much greater chance that my conclusions won't be reliable, they won't be robust, and could be argued with, of course. So there's a range of things that we need to think about and take into consideration when it comes to due professional care. This is probably the second standard that interests me the most in terms of new standards in this area, professional skepticism. As I said last time, the term professional skepticism didn't appear in the last IPPF and international standards. You can't find it within that. But the institutes recognise this is important. It's been important in external audit and in accountancy for many years. It's important for internal audit too. We must exercise professional skepticism when planning and delivering our work. It goes on to say we must maintain an attitude that includes inquisitiveness, curiosity, if you like. We must critically assess the reliability of information. Is this accurate? Is this valid? Is it complete? Do I have confidence in it? Who produced this? Who told me this? Who showed me this? This is what they've shown me. What haven't they shown me? So there is stuff around the reliability of information. We all know that some information is more reliable than other information. Things that we've seen, things that we've done, is much more reliable than things that someone told us that they heard somebody else talking about. Much less reliable. We have to be straightforward. We have to be honest when raising concerns and asking questions about inconsistent information. Document says this, but your people are doing that. Policy says this, but in our observational testing, we saw that that wasn't happening. Why is that? So there's certainly things that we can do here. Now, open questions can help. Does this look okay? What was I expecting? What is missing? How accurate or complete is it? Where else can I go to get other evidence that might support it or discredit it? How else can I corroborate this or kind of get more comfortable with this? who built it, who designed it, who created it, who documented it, who told me it, or gave it to me. These are all things that we can do, checks in our head. I think I shared this quote with you last time, those of you who were with us. Richard Chambers, many of you will know of Richard, CEO of IA Global. Professional skepticism is a mindset that must be applied continuously, from designing the audit program to gathering and evaluating the evidence. Throughout every audit, we must maintain an attitude that says, I may like these people, often we don't, but I may like these people and I may understand what they are telling me, but I must verify the fact independently and objectively. Let's check the facts independently and objectively. Then the bit I really like, I neither believe nor disbelieve until that checking is complete. And, you know, that is important. That is that objectivity that we were talking about earlier. I neither believe nor disbelieve until the work is finished. I neither trust nor distrust. I kind of like those words. So skepticism is about questioning. It's about doubting the validity and truthfulness of things that we're told, statements, of documents, of other information. Remember, the Institute uses the word information. We might use the word evidence. Internal auditors apply professional skepticism when they seek evidence to support and validate statements made by management, rather than simply trusting the information given. Okay, so just because a senior manager might tell us something, because a senior manager may say it's terrible, it doesn't matter. We need to find the evidence to support and validate this so we can draw our own conclusions about this. Are they right? Are they wrong? Is it somewhere in between? Professional skepticism. The final principles are around confidentiality. And really, these again haven't changed a huge amount. Now, obviously, across Europe, we have data privacy legislation, GDPR in the EU, and other similar legislation in many other jurisdictions. And that obviously has meant organizations face a little bit more in the way of risks when it comes to personal or sensitive data. But this goes beyond personal and sensitive data. Confidentiality in terms of information overall. We, yeah, sorry, I think I've missed the word must have. Maybe I have. Oh, no, it's a principle, so that's why it's not there. Internal auditors use and protect information appropriately. Okay, so that's the principle. We've got to use and protect the information that we come into contact with during our work or through our work appropriately. Why is this important? Because of our access to absolutely everything. We can get our hands on anything we want, usually. Certainly our charters will often talk about unrestricted access, people, places, documents, and data. So something to bear in mind. Yeah, thank you, Vladimir. It's a very true quote. You said first check and then believe. It comes back to the old sort of President Reagan type attitude, doesn't it? Check and verify and then trust afterwards. So very famous kind of quote. I like it. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, now when it comes to our confidentiality, so we can access anything to do our work. It can be physical documentation, records, papers, reports. It can, of course, relate to digital information increasingly, of course. It can come from oral, spoken sources. It can come from formal or informal meetings in our organization. Sophie, your hands up. Let me give you the ability to speak. What's the question? Any questions, Sophie? hear anything either. I'm really sorry. I know you put your mic on there, but we can't hear you. Oh, thanks for the comment, Dragon. My pleasure. Thank you. Sophie, if you do have a question, put it in the chat, and I'll take a look at it in just a minute, okay?
John, I have a question here, but maybe
please.
you are mentioning something later. But yeah, of course, this is a very, very important standard. Yeah, due to the amount of information that internal auditors have access to, very sensitive information sometimes.
Yeah.
So what happens when there are, according to national legislation, for example, certain exceptions to this principle? For example, of course, when there's, I don't know, there's a case in the judiciary and the auditors are asked.
Par exemple, les auditeurs doivent donner des informations judiciaires. Ou lorsqu'il y a des demandes d'informations de la société civile. Les fonctionnaires doivent donner des informations. Donc, comment on peut trouver l'équilibre entre... Ou comment on peut définir des limites?
Okay, so it's a very fair question and not an easy question.
Oui, la question est très bonne et pas très simple. Sur tous les aspects confidentialité du travail d'audit, ils sont importants. Il est important de respecter cette confidentialité pour que chacun ait confiance en nous, pour que la confiance soit partagée au sein de l'organisation, pour que chacun sache que nous n'allons pas partager les informations qui sont partagées.
Or to people that shouldn't really have access to it. However, we did see some commentary in the earlier standards around making disclosures if required to do so by law or regulation. And if we come across aspects in our work that basically are illegal and shouldn't be happening, then we do need to think how we go about reporting on those in the most appropriate way. And I think when it comes to things that are illegal, that trumps, sorry, I don't like the word, but that trumps our obligation under this sort of confidentiality clause. So, I found something illegal. The regulation or law says I need to go and talk to law enforcement. My standards say I have to maintain confidentiality. I think the fact that we found something that illegal outweighs the requirements of this confidentiality clause. Now, it might be that I go and talk to the chair of the audit committee and explain the situation that I'm in, what I am intending to do. And, if that's an appropriate communications avenue, I could maybe seek their counsel and their advice. But, I think law trumps principle in this case. Now, it might be that during the course of our work, we want to take a look at some sensitive HR related information. And maybe because of GDPR, HR don't really want to share it with us. A slightly different aspect. In this sort of situation, I would be trying to think, well, how can I access this information while still ensuring GDPR is in place? Are there things that we don't have to see? Can I have the names taken out, redacted, if you like, so that I'm looking at the data, but I can't say that it's John's data or Pilar's data? So sometimes there can be ways not of working around laws in a bad way, but by adapting our request for information, potentially getting it and still staying legally compliant. Slightly different angle, more to do with field work there. Now, just so you know, Pilar, Bojana has written in the chat is disabled, only the section Q&A works. So I don't know whether that's something that we can try and resolve for the last 30 minutes or
Yes,
not.
I will try to solve this. I'm going to check.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. I'm going to finish talking in about 5 minutes, so we'll have time for sort of any other questions, I hope, then. Okay. So principle 5, all about confidentiality, as we can, as we were saying. We do need to think about how we manage the data and information we come into contact with. We have our job to do. We have a charter that says access all areas. And yet we do have the challenges of huge amounts of data, and often very sensitive or potentially secretive or classified type data as well. Well, I think we need to be alert to the risks to try to manage this sensibly. And that's really what the principle is saying here. When it comes to the standards, 2 standards in this section. We must follow the relevant policies, procedures, laws, and regulations when using information. So, of course, our organizational policies for data handling apply to us too. So we shouldn't be sending sensitive information by email to our personal email addresses so that we can work at home. We shouldn't be reckless in terms of leaving personal or sensitive information out at night on our desks when we go home. You know, the usual kind of safeguards that you would expect for information handling in any organization. And then because, you know, the standard is always that much higher for us, you know, clearly we can't use any information that we get through our work for personal gain. So I can't tell my friends to buy shares in our company based upon some work that I've done ahead of the official release of the company's performance results for the last quarter. Wouldn't be ethical, it wouldn't be appropriate. It's insider dealing, insider trading. Can't use it for personal gain or to benefit others, of course. So we do need access to information, but again, we need to be able to show our stakeholders that they can trust us and have confidence in how we handle, manage, and ultimately dispose of and delete and get rid of information when we no longer need it, of course. So use of information. When it comes to the protection of information, again, the same sort of principles apply. We've got to think about confidentiality. We've got to think about privacy. We've got to think about ownership of information and how we use that while it's necessary for us in the sort of audit life cycle. We have to dispose of confidential information securely in line with our organizational practices. We certainly can't disclose it to unauthorized parties. And this is where that answer to your question comes in, unless there is a legal or professional responsibility to do so. So law trumps this, as we said. We've also got to think about, you know, the occasional carelessness or mistake that can be made. I was traveling in a taxi from, where was I? Vilnius, from my hotel in Vilnius to the airport the other week. And I put my phone on the back seat of the taxi and the taxi drove off and I walked through the airport and then realized that I'd lost my phone. Now, there isn't anything particularly sensitive on my phone. It was more an annoying sort of thing and a panic sort of thing rather than its work laptop full of payroll records. But nevertheless, it shows how easy it is, particularly with small laptops, with smartphones, with iPads that some organizations use to accidentally lose a piece of work equipment. Now, of course, these should all be password protected. They should have encrypted data and all of that, and the ability to be wiped remotely once we recognize we've lost them. But mistakes can happen, of course. And so we have to manage those sorts of situations just the same as anybody else in an organization. Oh my goodness, the floodgates have opened. 20 chat things I see now. All right, looks like it's working now. Okay, I better stop talking then in just a moment. So, that's our whistle-stop tour of the main two. 5 main areas, as we've said. Range of standards, about 13 standards for us to follow. Probably about half of them out the same as what we've had previously. Probably about half of them are either new or have changed a little bit, and we'll have to think through a bit more about what these mean for us going forward. I've just seen Alastair's joined as well. Nice to see you. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I've spoken a lot. Now, I'm very happy to take questions. Very happy to hear other people's views about this. Whatever is useful and relevant to use. Sophie, I see your hand up, my friend. Is there something you wanted to say? Anybody else wants to say anything, ask anything? I'm all ears.
Please feel free to ask either in the chat or the Q&A, or if you prefer to speak, please do raise your hands and we will give you the floor, although we haven't managed until now, but I don't know if it was because there were some accidentally raised hands. But yes, please make your questions.
While we're waiting, I'll try and ask a question. And let's go back to demonstrating integrity and how we how we demonstrate courage. And I think we're going to be people are going to be in situations, and we have to recognize that we work in some political environments as well, which will make being courageous and always telling the truth. Well, not telling the truth, but being courageous and
Very courageous.
being courageous